The first thing you have to be able to do is write the converse, inverse, and contrapositive of a sentence. I'll put it up over there on the board. Starting with the converse. What do we do for the converse? All you do is you switch the order. That's it. So right here, the converse of that sentence should have been, if you are tardy, then you are not on time to class. Or you were not. And remember, if you forget the converse, remember I told you the story about the shoes, all you do is switch it, that's it. What about the inverse? What do we call the inverse? The not verse. It's the not verse. So basically you take the opposite of each part. What's the opposite of you are not on time to class?
You are on time.
So if you are on time to class, then what?
You are not tardy.
You were not tardy, because the opposite of you are tardy is you were not tardy. Alright, what about the contrapositive? What do we do? You switch it and negate it. That big long word, it's bigger than the other two, so you have to do the most work for it. You have to switch it and negate it. So if you are not tardy, then what?
You were on time to class.
Then you were on time to class. Does anybody have any questions about those three? Because basically the first 4 questions on your test are all just, can you write the converse, inverse, contrapositive? We're okay with that? One of those 3 is more important than the other 3 for a specific reason. Which one is it and why? Alright, Zach, you said contrapositive. Why is the contrapositive important?
Because it's the true statement.
Alright, it's kind of. What word are we going to use though? What's it, if I ask you? Logically equivalent. If it says it's logically equivalent, it's talking about the contrapositive. That's what you need to know. Alright, that's also the one that might say valid conclusion, kind of when he was talking about true statement. If this is true, this would also be true. So remember, this is based like a checklist. If you see an if-then sentence, what's going to show up? What symbol? How many? 1 arrow. You know it's going to be right in the middle about when the word then shows up. Okay, you do not study. Which one of these letters has to do with studying? S. But that is you study. So what is you do not study going to be? So the squiggly line, S. Then you will not get good grades. Well, you get good grades is G. So what comes after the arrow? The opposite of G. Okay, down here. You will pass geometry. What letter is that? P. And then if and only if. What's that look like? 2 arrows. 2 ifs, 2 arrows. You study, which was S. What symbol is and? The one that looks like an A. It looks like an A. Get good grades, which is G. So P, if and only if, S and G. Coming over here, therefore. What's therefore look like?
3 dots.
3 dots that form a triangle. Therefore, alright, if you study, so S, then you will pass geometry, which is P. One symbol we did not use right there was this. What does that represent? Or. You need to know that. It didn't show up, but you do need to know that. Or is that symbol. Alright, real quick. Not going to even make you do this. What is the inverse of the statement in symbols? Well, the inverse. Which verse was the inverse? The not verse. So what's the opposite of not are? Are. Then what's the opposite of S? Not S. That's just a skill that you need to be able to have. It's the exact same thing. That's pretty easy. You do the converse, inverse, contrapositive the same way. Alright, Venn diagrams. Again with these, I would go through one at a time, just mark each statement as true or false. Alright, so when I look, all football players play offense or defense. Does everyone play offense or defense? No. Offense and defense is this area right here. You can put somebody out there. And they don't even do either one. So that was false. No football players play offense and defense. Is that true? No, because again, there are some people right here. So that means that's not true. All football players play defense. Obviously not, because what would this person do? Play offense. Do they play defense? What would this person do? Are they still on the football team?
Yes,
How can you tell?
they're football.
They're football players, right? But this would be false. Some football players play offense and defense. We already said that was true because that's this whole area here. So that was true. And D is what you were looking for. So you need to be able to break down the Venn diagram based on these statements. Alright, another thing you have to be able to do is take in a whole bunch of statements, pick out the Venn diagrams. It's kind of the opposite. Instead of giving you the Venn diagram and picking the statement, now you have statements to pick out the Venn diagram. So I'll just go one at a time. Some dogs have spots. Alright, well let's go right here. Based on this picture, do some of the dogs have spots? Yeah, there's spots inside the dogs. What about here? Yeah. What about here? Spots are in the dogs and spots are in the dogs. So all of them, we couldn't eliminate anything. Go down. Some dogs have shaggy fur. Well, shaggy fur, shaggy fur, shaggy fur, shaggy fur. It's another one that didn't help us do anything. No dogs have spots and shaggy fur. So what should that look like?
They shouldn't be touching each other.
They shouldn't be touching each other at all. So spots and shaggy fur not touching. That still works. Spots and shaggy fur intersect. So is that good or bad? Bad. That's gone. Spots and shaggy fur intersect. No good. Spots and shaggy fur are separate. Okay? So that gets us down to two answer choices. It says some spotted dogs have gray fur. So should those intersect or not? Yes, they should intersect a little bit. Do they intersect here? Yeah. And you look down here, spots and gray do not intersect. So that's no good. And A was your answer. Any questions about that? Alright, now the conclusions, the laws of logic is the last thing I want to discuss. Alright, this one is one problem, and these two are the other type. This first one is different because you're going to have an if-then sentence as your conclusion. Anytime there's two if-then sentences, you're going to have an if-then sentence as a conclusion. This is the one I was talking about. You know, we had that guy that was fiending. What do you want to do with the middleman? Get rid of it. We don't want the middleman. Get rid of, you buy clothes. So the obvious conclusion is what's left over. The obvious conclusion is if you go to the mall, then you spend money. Is that the only one though? No. What's the other way it could be written?
If you don't spend money,
If you don't spend money, then you didn't go to the mall. Fair enough? What's the maximum number of conclusions we've ever had? 2. The obvious one and the contrapositive. That is always the case. And there will always be 2. It's possible to have the obvious one and the contrapositive every single time. You will never have 3, but 2 are always possible. Alright, down here. This one's a little bit different because you have one if-then sentence and then a statement. And when you have a statement to finish it off, then you're going to have a statement as your conclusion if it exists. Alright, so let's look through. If you smile a lot, then you are happy. Well, Mr. Krabs is not happy. Does that show up in the hypothesis or the conclusion? But why is it still possible to have a conclusion this time?
Because he's not happy.
Because he's not happy. So he's working on the contrapositive. So after not happy, what can you say about smiling a lot?
He does not.
Mr. Krabs does not smile a lot. Okay? Now let's go down here. If you smile a lot, then you are happy. Kristen is happy. Where does is happy show up? In the conclusion. Can I have a conclusion this time?
No.
No. Why?
Because it's not the negative or the contrapositive.
It's not the contrapositive. What they were trying to write is what? What is it if you just switch the order and that's it? The converse. But the converse is not a valid conclusion. So there was no conclusion. Because she tried to write the converse, not the contrapositive. You see the difference in those two? I put those both up there for a reason.
Yeah.
Okay?
So you only can do it if it's a contrapositive?
The contrapositive or the obvious way. Like if it would have said, Kristen smiles a lot. Well, there smiles a lot. And if you know she smiles a lot, what could the conclusion have been then? Kristen is happy. Because that would have been the obvious one. Because it's exactly the same order. So it either has to be the exact same order or the contrapositive. Either one. Okay? We actually did this exact same problem yesterday, but I wanted to bring it up again using it with symbols. I just wanted to show you one more time for those of you who aren't here. Alright? Starting right here. Cover it up. If it's going to be the obvious way, what should be the first letter under my hand? A. That's what showed up. And if it's going to work, what should be next? Not B. But B shows up. Does that work? No. So you come over here. If it's going to be the obvious one, what's under my hand? Not C. And then what should be next? F. So does that work? Now you come down here. If it's going to be the obvious one, what's under my hand? X. Ooh, that's not X. What's the other way it might be? The opposite of Y, because what are we trying to write here? The contrapositive. So not Y followed by not X. So does that work? What's wrong over here? Where did the S even come from, right? That's just random. Alright? So that is no good. Alright, last thing I want to show you. This is the same thing, just with symbols, with the conclusions we just did. Who's the middleman? Who do we want to get rid of? Q. No more Q. Get rid of Q. What's the obvious conclusion? Therefore, not S, then T. Okay? That's the obvious one, but it's not always going to show up that way. What's the other way you need to look out for? The opposite of T, then S. Does anybody have any questions on anything we talked about? How do you find slope? Rise over run. What type of slope does that line have? Positive. What about that line?
Negative.
Okay. How do I find midpoint? Yeah, what's in the middle? I mean, you can do that. How do you find length or distance? Pythagorean theorem. Draw your right triangle and do a squared plus b squared equals c squared. What about if I was trying to prove that these two lines were parallel, and I had a bunch of answer choices, there's two things that has to be true. What are they? Number one, they need to be on different lines. They need to be on different lines, and the statement has to be true. Right? Different lines, and the statement has to be true. That's good. But anytime I see this picture, regardless, let's say this is 110 degrees, and I wanted to know what that was. What should I do? Star box the picture, right? So if you star box the picture, okay? Well, I got a star in a box. What does that mean?
They both equal 180.
They add up to 180. That's it. What if I would have gotten two boxes? What does that mean? They're equal. What if you get two stars? They're the same. What if I would have given you a picture that looked like this? What's the most number of lines you can ever use in a picture like this?
3,
3. What 2 lines do you have to use?
C and D,
C and D, because why?
they're parallel.
They're the ones that are parallel. So you had to use C, you had to use D. Now if I'm trying to find X, what would be the other line you want to use here?
A,
A. And then what would you do to the picture?
shut off.
This star box there. And a star in a box means they add up to 180. Alright, before you leave, you need 2 things. Something to write with and a calculator that turns on. I will bring batteries in case yours dies, but you need something to write with and a calculator that turns on. There's some in there. We are not going to come back. We're going to the Media Tech lab.